Good day to you and all those around your table. As you set out to adventure with your friends and family while playing Dungeons and Dragons, I have practiced a couple tips around my own table that I think make for a compelling story. So my name is Jonathan, and I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for about 2 years now. Uh, I should say, I've been dungeon mastering for about 2 years. It all started when I had a 3 month break from work, and I was home with my kids and wanted to pick up a hobby. I've always been a fan of fantasy storytelling. I loved Tolkien's work and C.S. Lewis, and really diving into all these fantasy books. Book of Three, Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of Nim. I loved all those books as a kid and still do as an adult. Uh, the reason I got into Dungeons and Dragons was to improve my understanding of how to tell stories and how they really inform our lives. We are all formed by the stories we tell ourselves and each other. We use words to communicate and often develop pictures in our minds of what we think we hear the other person is saying. Developing perspective and collaborating on a narrative is a skill that takes time to develop. I have found playing Dungeons and Dragons helps with building that skill. I hope you enjoy these tips on how to tell better stories using role playing games. First, I would like to talk about character development. So if you're starting at a brand new table, maybe you're doing a session zero with your dungeon master, or maybe you're deciding what kind of campaign you want to run. Um, first of all, if you've never played, look at my video, Beginner's Guide for Playing Dungeons and Dragons. But first of all, character development. There's rule books out there, there's stats, there's numbers, there's things you could do, but I believe at the heart of it, Dungeons and Dragons is really just a way to tell stories. We've been doing it since the beginning of time, whether it's sitting around a campfire and telling war stories or ghost stories or stories about our ancestors, about the creation of the world, where we came from and where we're going. We're so used to sitting around and listening to someone. And it's something that I think is really lost in our culture right now. So this is why I'm so passionate about this, because it's real. I see it right now between the games that I'm playing online and the games that I'm playing at actual tables, and even with my family. I'm seeing it develop our communication skills and develop our perspective shifting so that we can understand what the other person means when they say what they say. So anyway, if you want to make a character, what I encourage you to do is start with a story. Ask the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Some great questions to ask. From where do you originate? Where did you come from? What is this place like? Did you come from the Badlands, living off the wild? Did you come from a noble court in a busy metropolitan city? Did you grow up on the high seas, where the ocean is your home and land is a vacation? Did you grow up underground, maybe in servitude of another species, an alien race? Uh, did, Speaking of alien race, maybe you grew up. Oh gosh. Speaking of alien race, maybe you grew up out of this world that you're currently playing in. The where is very important. It tells a lot about who that person is. And then after you figure out the where, you can start plugging in uh, uh, the species or race or ancestry you want to play. You can start talking about the class you want to play. The second question, why adventure now? Why stop your comfy life? I do a couple blogs, and one of the blogs I talked about is that adventurers, the difference between adventurers and everyone else is that adventurers decided their current situation was was uncomfortable to stay, and so it compelled them to get out there and adventure. Like Bilbo Baggins, if you can think, he had a great life. He had no reason to go out on an adventure except something called to him. Gandalf presented this request. He made fast friends with the dwarves. There was something that kind of called to him to get him out of his comfort zone. And that's what you have to establish is why is the person starting to leave the comforts of their home? Otherwise, you're just telling a domestic story, domesticated and dragons, if you will. The next question to ask is what are your personal goals? The Dungeon Master, of course, is going to tell a great story with a campaign, an adventure where You end up meeting the bad guy and save the world. But really, your character needs to have a personal goal. This is really important because a flat character is just a bunch of numbers. It's someone who's not well rounded. It's someone who doesn't have morals and values and beliefs. But if you develop a character who has a personal goal, it's interesting that I found is most often we metagame with Dungeons and Dragons when we should be immersed ourselves in role playing. And in our own life, we immerse ourselves in our own experience rather than metagaming and becoming aware of why we do the things we do. So what I've found is when you ask yourself about your character, what are your personal goals? What I've found is that I myself have evaluated what are my personal goals? Why am I getting out of bed in the morning? Why am I doing the things I do? Where am I going? So that's the reason personal goals is an important question to answer, because I mean, you are developing a character, and in doing so, you are also developing your own personal character. The next question is, who else do you know? You are not just an island, and this is really important. I think I remember a study that says we can only really truly know 140 acquaintances in our circle, and out of that there are 70 what we would call friends, and out of that there are only 25 close friends, and out of that there are only about 5 people that are intimates. So those concentric circles really narrow down who is close to you. I think your character development, as you tell a story, you should know someone. You should have maybe a list of 3 to 5 people that you are close to. Uh, you know, don't start with the old trope that my family was, destroyed by orcs and they left me as an orphan and now I have nobody. There are occasionally those kind of stories, but it does feel like most people out in the world that I meet have connections, even if they are heroes. They're going out on the front lines of whatever their job requires them to do, but they have connections and bonds of why they're fighting for something back home. The next question, when were you born? When I tell my stories, I love to have timelines. I love to have years, dates, months, holidays. I think those really mark. We are story formed by a lot of the traditions that we tell, and those traditions are often related to time. Make sure your character has a birthday. Uh, make sure your character has monuments and anniversaries. Think about, refer back to Tolkien, the anniversary of Frodo's mortal wound. That's a big deal, and that something should happen on that anniversary. So I think it's kind of cool that you can ask yourself, what time of the year were you born? What happened? Anything special in the cosmos? How did the stars align under your birth? Last question is, how will you advance? There are lots of growth development models. I'm also a fan of Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, all those kind of personality typing systems, because it can take you to where you are right now and where you want to go. And as a character, I think, you shouldn't just, wake up one session and just magically roll some dice and say, I leveled up to level 3 to level 4, and now I have this ability. Tell the story. Take those little milestones that the rule books give you and say, okay, I'm here at level 1, but I want to get to level 6. And what does that mean? How can I tell a story stretching from level 1 to level 6? Again, it all goes back to telling a story. Using those questions, the who, what, when, where, why, how, and using the rule books. If your character has a +5 charisma, how did that happen? I developed an NPC one time. I decided they had an amazing charisma. It's like +9, but there was a story behind it. He sold his soul to a devil lord in exchange for immortality. As long as he performs these duties and favors and writes home every once in a while, he gets like these bonuses. But that's taking like just a simple number and asking yourself, okay, why do they have a charisma that's this high? Why do they have the background of fishermen? What's the story behind that? Obviously, you don't need to write a novel, and you don't need to write a lot, even at all, but just simply answering the questions behind the background, behind the class, behind where you came from, what family you were born into. So all that being said, the reason this is important and what I want to end with is we as people are story formed. We are formed by the stories we tell each other and the stories we tell ourselves. Dungeons and Dragons, I have found, is a great way to look back in the mirror and ask yourself the same questions. Who are you? Where did you come from? Why are you here? I mean, these are very, deep questions to ask, but I think it's much better than just simply coasting and going on autopilot. And the same way in the game, there's nothing worse than just slogging through combat or slogging through dice rolling and just on autopilot. Like I roll for perception, I roll for attack, I came from the faraway land that no one even knows about, and that's why I'm here, because I'm seeking gold, and blah, 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 blah. Boring story. I think we can tell ourselves boring stories as people as well, when we don't ask good questions. So that's my big pitch, is a great dungeon master, a great player, a great person who plays Dungeons and Dragons, and I think someone who excels in life, just asks good questions. So I hope you enjoy this corner of character development. Remember to metagame your own life, become aware of yourself, and tell a great story. And so, our story continues.